beginning in Luke 22, beginning with the 63rd verse. Now the men who were holding Jesus began to mock him and beat him. They also blindfolded him and kept asking him, "Prophesy, who is that struck you?" They kept heaping many other insults on him. Then day came, and the assembly of the elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, gathered together, and they brought him to their council. They said, "If you are the Messiah, tell us." He replied, "If I tell you, you will not believe, and if I question you, you will not answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God." All of them asked, "Are you then the Son of God?" He said to them, "You say that I am." Then they said, "What further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. I used to work in a church where every year during Lent, early in Lent, we had a ladies' retreat. It was for all the women in the church. It was an event. It was not to be missed. I mean, we had speakers, and we had, well, it was usually a speaker. We had authors who came in. We had Friday nights. It was overnight at a hotel. Friday nights, we had these different craft things that were related to whatever the theme was and who the speaker was going to be. We had Vespers. We had communion when it was all done. We ate together, and it was a fancy hotel. One year, we went to a retreat center instead of to the fancy hotel, and it did not work at all. And the reason it didn't work was because there was one big tradition with the ladies' retreat that you couldn't really do the same way out at a retreat center. And it was on Friday night. Everybody looked forward to it. Remember, we're in Lent. Now, in Lent, it's often a tradition that we give something up. And one of the things that people often give up, because we do it frivolously, right, is we'll give up things like chocolate or sweets or coffee. People will do stuff like this. I know you're shaking your head. You don't maybe, but some people do, okay? Some people do. And the problem was that this big tradition for the ladies' retreat that we had to have on Friday night was this magnificent display of desserts. Desserts of every kind. Beautiful, luscious, decadent desserts, many of which were, of course, chocolate. And so every year for Lent, all of the people who had given up sweets or chocolate would arrive at the ladies' retreat, and when the decadence would be poured out, they would go, "Oh, temptation, what am I going to do?" And I promise you, every lady, every year decided that this was the little Easter set aside in which that didn't count. Because nobody was missing those desserts. Pastor included. I was not about to give that up. They were really, really good. But we tend to think about being tempted as things like to eat the dessert that we really don't need or shouldn't have. We think of being tempted to spend money that we don't have and build up credit card debt. We tend to think of being tempted as doing things that are bad for us, bad for someone else, or just flat wrong. But that's not the only way that we're ever tempted. Think about that. It's not the only way we're tempted. Sometimes we're tempted to do something really good. Really, really good. That's not ours to do. Jesus, very early on, we think about temptation, and we all go right to the first temptation story for Jesus when he's in the desert or in the Emu. He's out in the abyss for 40 days and 40 nights of prayer, and the devil comes to him and says, after 40 days and 40 nights, you'd be really hungry. I mean, those desserts would be looking really good, and after 40 days and 40 nights, and he says, turn these stones into bread. Well, better yet, creme brulee. And Jesus is really hungry. And how easy that would be. What would it hurt? What would it hurt? I'm hungry. It's just a little bread. I'm not going to make it creme brulee. I'm hungry. And he doesn't do it. He offers him all of the world to be the one who reigns over all the nations. Just worship me, and it's all yours. What good Jesus could have done if he were the one who was the ruler, the king of all the world, where he could command people. He could make us do what's right. All the people he could feed, turning stone into bread. All of the good he could do if he was the ruler of the world. But he doesn't do it. Throw yourself off the pinnacle. Fly, Jesus, fly. You're not going to hit the ground. We all know who you are. You're not going to hit the ground. How tempting that would be, because you know people would have seen that. Some guy flying off the mountain's not something people are going to miss. And how much people would have listened to him. Right from the get-go, they would know he was the Son of God, and people would have paid attention. How tempting that must have been. And he didn't do it. And it says that the devil leaves him and waits for a more opportune time. And before the days of around, I'm going to say it was the 80s, and all of the different movies that we have that give us a lot of our visions and what it's like in the Gospels, we don't think much of Jesus being tempted past the 40 days and 40 nights. But you know, when he's there for the ascension, anyway, when Moses and Elijah are there with him, right? And they all light up, how tempting that could be to just say, you know what, I know what's coming. I think I'm done. I'm going to just walk back on up to heaven with my friends here, and let's not do this. How tempting that must have been, and he doesn't do it. And then we have things like the last temptation of Christ. Y'all remember that movie? I mean, we're going to back up. We're going to go to the Passion. Remember the Passion when it came out? And one of the places that we see from a movie, we actually start to realize that maybe Jesus was tempted when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and he's praying to not go do this. To not go do the cross. You know, Jesus, you can still do a lot of really good stuff without that. Or when they're beating him. You know, he doesn't even correct them. When they're questioning Jesus, they say, "Are you the Son of God?" He says, "You say that I am." And they say, "What more do we need? You heard it from his own lips." What did we hear from his own lips? We heard that you say that I am. He doesn't correct it. He doesn't stand up for himself. He doesn't defend himself. And since he can take a Roman soldier's ear up off the ground and put it right back on, I'm pretty sure he could have just said, and with his finger, and they'd all be dead. He could have stopped it. He didn't have to do it. And then when The Last Temptation of Christ came out, such a controversial movie, at least at the time, and it was controversial, so I had to go see it. And the temptation being pointed out, Jesus could have just stepped down off the cross. Or he could have just lifted himself up off the cross and floated off and floated back to the ground. And wouldn't that have caused a stir? And wouldn't people have paid attention? And wouldn't it have all been different? And what good he could have done in those moments if he had just done that. Because everybody would have believed. There wouldn't have been any of this going and spreading the gospel. It would have spread like wildfire. Everybody would have known. None of those things were his to do. Jesus had a very specific purpose, a very specific reason for being. We talked about know your why back in stewardship. Jesus knew his why. He knew why he was here, and that was what he was to live into. And all of the other good things that he could do, and he did some good things, but those were not his overall, overriding why. And you know, if he had taken any of those other ways, would we have been here today? Or would it just have been over? He had a job to do. One thing. One major thing. Well, really two. The first was to teach us who God is because we get it so wrong. And the second was the cross. Jesus' purpose. As a church, we have a purpose. And it's for us to discern. There are wonderful things that we can do. There are wonderful things we can do as individuals. We know that we can do more and greater good when we come together as a whole. And it is for us to discern what is ours to do. To serve the entire Metroplex is probably not ours to do. To serve Sunnyvale, Texas, where we are planted and where we have our address, is ours to do. And there is no one else to do it. It's ours. There is no other Methodist church in Sunnyvale. That's ours. There's nobody else to do the work that is to be done in Sunnyvale but us. But to do what we are given to do, and to not be tempted to go off on all of these rabbit trails, to be people who every time somebody yells squirrel, we're off in a different direction. To maintain focus, we have to do that by staying focused on who Jesus is for us and what we are to do and what it is ours to do and what is not ours to do. Now, some people love labyrinths and some people hate them. I'm one who loves them. Because for me, this is a form of prayer that helps me stay focused. That when I drift away, I can pull myself back to where I am, because with the labyrinth, we are reminded that where we are and the work that we have to do is right here, right now. Next weekend, we have an egg hunt, and we have hot dogs, and it's Carrie, I mean, all the work that has gone into bringing that together and making this going to happen. I can't believe how many eggs we've got. And I've got some chips in my car. Okay, all this coming together. This is ours. But we can't drop the ball. All the planning has gone in, but now we have to show up. Now we have to step out of our comfort zone and invite people. Now we have to remember that we can't just do this piece, we've got to do the whole thing. We've got to keep our focus from the beginning all the way to the end. The work that we're going to be doing in the Sunnyvale schools, we have to keep our focus and stay focused. You know, there must have been times Jesus was discouraged, times where he didn't know where he was going, what was coming next. But we stay focused all the way in. And you know, you go into this thing and you can feel like, oh my gosh, how are you ever going to get out of it? Kind of like a dark wood. We have to stay focused on what is ours to do. The beginning of the year, we have a covenant service. We renew our baptism. We renew our covenants with God and with one another. And in that covenant service, one of the things that we say in the prayer that we pray is, put me to doing or set me aside. In essence, we're saying, God, give me the work that is mine to do and turn me away from that which belongs to someone else. We all have work to do. What is our work to do? Amen.